Today I went to a round table. I was invited, invitation only, by our Congresswoman, Lisa Blunt Rochester. Hey, Sister Paulette. Sister Paulette, I called you twice. You ain't called me back. I hope you're okay. So I was invited, invitation only, to this round table by Lisa Blunt Rochester on today. So I was there, right? And I walked into this room, and this is just leading me into what I'm going to talk about on tonight. So stay with me. If you haven't shared, share as we dive in. Stay with me. I promise you won't be disappointed. Welcome to Tangible Thursdays. So I was invited, invitation only. You couldn't come. She had to invite you to this round table. And today when I got there, I was sitting at this table with about 15 other women for Women's Month. And as she was sitting there and I was looking around the table, I was sitting there saying to myself, looking at the table, and I was saying, Lord, I feel like I don't belong here. Hear me. I'm going to help somebody tonight. I was telling Bishop, tears welled up in my eyes, and as I was sitting there and I was looking, and I'm like, I feel like I don't belong. Why am I sitting here at this table? I was sitting here with individuals that you guys see on TV sometimes. I was sitting there with commissioners and people that run businesses and people that run the VAs and people that run all of these magnificent, hey Dad, all these magnificent things. And I was sitting at this round table today, and sitting directly across from Lisa Blunt Rochester, and she's saying how this was something that she didn't want to do for social media and have, different media outlets there. But she trusted the voices that were in the room and some things she wanted to take back to the floor of Congress, and she wanted to talk to those that she trusted. So I'm sitting there in this room, and I'm saying in my head, Lord, I don't belong here. I'm like, what am I doing here? How did my years of going through so much trauma land me in this room here? And I want to encourage you guys that as I was sitting there saying to the Lord, why am I here? I said, I don't belong here. And the Lord said to me, but you're already here. Many of us, we have gotten into places where we belong in certain arenas. We belong in certain areas. Stick with me. Share if you haven't shared already. You have been in different situations where you belong in different areas. And even in the midst of us seeing that we are allowed to be in this area because God has ordained us and let us be into these doors and go into these situations, sometimes we sit there and we don't think we qualify for what God already qualified us for. And I'm sitting there with tears in my eyes, and as she started the meeting and she was talking about different topics, and she said, I visited the veterans home there, and I want your input about this, and I gave my input about that, and I'm watching these women as they listen, and I'm saying, Lord, how did this happen? How did I get here? And I want to encourage all of you guys that even though the trauma that you may have been through, the problems, the pain, it's Women's Month, so I'm talking to the women on tonight. But if all of this that you have been through, if you would have knew that the abuse that you had went through would have put you in a place that you would be indoors, that people, no man that could have opened, but it had to be nobody but God. I'm no respective person, but here I am sitting in this room, and I'm like, how did what I went through land me here? And we know it could only be God that can take something that was so hurtful, so painful. I was listening to some of them, and they were talking about the things that they've been through, and this are people that, and I promise you, I can say this, and I know it. There was nobody in the room that didn't make six figures in that room. There was not one person in that room that didn't make six figures. Not one. And I'm sitting there saying, listening to their trauma and watching them cry and watching them. And I'm like, how many of us live our everyday lives not realizing that we all are going through something? We all have been through pain. We all have problems and tribulations and trials. But that doesn't disqualify you for the call of God that God has put on your life. That doesn't disqualify you to start the business, to write the book, to have the investment, to walk in authority, to be sitting at tables that you think you don't belong. Just because you went through doesn't mean that God won't allow your going through to put you in places that you never thought you would be in. Allow your go through seasons to be your coming out victory. Like, you have to understand that when you go through seasons of hard times, that it doesn't just happen just because it's happening. A lot of times it's molding you, it's shaping you, it's creating you. Look at what Esther went through, what her culture went through in the Bible. I think about how Esther and her family and all that they were going through, and even though her uncle put her in this position and she got into this and she walked into this house and she's with the king and she gets favor. Watch this, but she never thought that she would be able to save her people by being in position. Oh, come on here, somebody. And many of you don't realize that in your going through, you'll be able to save people being in position. You know, I brought up topics and they're like, oh my goodness, we never even thought of that. And, you know, how is that happen? And I talked to them about today at the round table. And if you're just getting here, share the video. You got to go back and watch. And I talked to them about how even when people are in service, that gap of service on their resume, that sometimes is frowned upon because it's not explained. Yes, you can explain on your resume, but sometimes when you have that gap of service, it doesn't look as if it's work experience. So they'll hire somebody else that has the work experience, even though this individual may very well be able to run the whole business that they're applying for a job at. But because of this service and time, they may not have the certificates that line up with their experience. And I talked to them about this topic, and it fell on me so strong as I was leaving from getting something with my kids on my way home tonight. And the Lord said, even though they may not have qualified you, you may not have came out of it with the accolades that you think you deserve, that does not mean that He won't sit you at the table that you belong. Even when you feel like you could have deserved more, you should have got more recognition, that you should have been sitting in a seat and you should have been in a certain position. Even when you had those hard times of feeling like you were left out and you were forgotten and they looked over you and they should have promoted you, but they promoted somebody else, and they should have been there to pat you on the back, but they looked over you. Even in those hard times, God will use your ability to go through with good measure and go through with faith and go through with love and go through with dignity and go through with respect. He will use those things that created you to go through in good health and go through with the right spirit. He'll use those things to put you in position, even though you don't realize that He was placing you there all along. I never recognized the fact that everything I went through prepared me to be at a table that I was in. I may not even have the education they may not even have. I may not have the money. Matter of fact, I'm going to be honest with you, I don't have the money that a lot of them have right now. And because of that, sometimes we'll count ourselves out. I want to encourage all of you on this Women's Month. Don't count yourself out. I know you may have the kids. You may have your husband. You may be going through. You may have your family. You may have the weight of everything on your shoulders. And you're trying to figure out, how do I go through this and still conquer what God has for me? I want you to know that it is possible to carry everything that you have going on and God still allow you to feel as though you're accomplishing every goal He has in you. You have to be encouraged on tonight that in spite of everything you've been through, you can conquer everything if you continue to go through. Sometimes going through may not always be easy. It may not always be feasible. And sometimes, if we be honest on tonight, we don't even want to come through. We don't even want to go through it. We don't even want to continue. But in your continuing, it's building something in you that they won't be able to shift you from the table you created. I said last year, I said, listen, God has anointed me personally, way before any of this, way before my husband, way before I was married, way before I had children. He already anointed me to be able to create my own table. I always bounce at what God told me to do. I would bounce back in the midst of time. And I'm not saying that to brag, but because He has anointed me to be able to bounce back from things, and you won't even know I went through them to begin with. So I want to encourage you on tonight, even in your going through, nobody should be able to tell that you're going through. Nobody should be able to know that you're going through. Why? Because when God created you to go through, you know that it's temporary. And if it's temporary, I won't be moved by the fact of what's going on around me, but I'll stand put on what God already told me that I'm able to do. So here we are. I'm sitting at this table and I'm creating an environment around me now where a lot of times when it's something contrary in my spirit, I have gotten to the point just in the last few months where I literally ignore it. I will literally sit there in a room full of people, and if it's not in my spirit, it doesn't move me. I just can tune it out. Especially when you have a lot of kids. Bishop will tell you all the time, they can call me 1,500 times, I won't answer them. But I answer them when I know something's wrong, because I have been equipped to be able to handle that because of the years that I went through all this trauma and things I had to do. So here I am sitting at this, and I'm sitting here talking to the Lord as they're talking to me, and as I'm presenting and I'm having conversations, and I'm saying, Lord, I said, but how did I get here? And He said, you are equipped for here because you went through and you never quit. See, many of us say we're going to quit. Many of us say we go through and that we're not going to do it no more. But it's saying it and doing it is two different things. And you have to be in a position that in spite of what may be coming out of your mouth, listen, and let me rephrase that, what came out of your mouth, because once you graduate to a certain status, you know to say better, talk better, do better, and you have to change the way that you talk. But you have to understand that in the midst of everything that you went through, that it was always a purpose. As I was getting older, I would always say, why do I have to watch all these kids? Why do I have to be around so many children? You know, I always watched everybody's kids. I always had kids around me. I always did. From a very young age, I always had that. But it equipped me to be able to come into my marriage and love all of my children the way that I do, and they never feel like they're treated differently. It equipped me to love the ministry children the way that I do. I tell people all the time, I come for their kids all the time. Right now, I'm fixing up the nursery right now as we speak for the children. Because I didn't realize what caused me pain, what caused me to not go. See, watch this, because sometimes what we go through will also protect us. See, because I had to watch the kids, I wasn't able to get into trouble that a lot of people around me were getting in trouble, because even in the midst of me going through and not liking it, God was still protecting me. So be careful that you understand that even as God has cut off some things and he's kept you away from some things and he shifted you and he's giving your focus to a different area than what you think it should be, still in that is protection. I still felt protected now, because even in that going through, I didn't know God was already equipping me. He was already preparing me. Your trauma will prepare you to be able to deal with the people that are coming. Your trauma will prepare you for the testimony. It will prepare you for the people that you got to minister to. Your pain will prepare you. But you got to understand that in preparing you, you got to go through it with the right spirit, with the right heart. Even when you don't like it. Sometimes the enemy will simply, and I shared this with Bishop. I said, you know, sometimes people get close to us and it seems like then all of a sudden they had to go away or they were shifted into a different direction. But I told people, it has nothing to do with us. When you get close to the anointing, you have to be prepared for the attacks. Hear me. You have to be prepared for the attacks. You can't get close to people that are really anointed and not be prepared for attacks. Why am I saying this to y'all on tonight as women? Because sometimes we let our guard down because we got comfortable. And you should always have your guard up, because you know God is fighting for you. But I'm wise enough to know that I got to see the enemy from afar off. When things happen, you can't fall apart. You can't go through and start crying and yelling and screaming and going, because you know the enemy was going to raise his head when you're doing the will of God. So if you're doing the will of God, he's going to try to throw you off course. He's going to try to do something to be able to get you in a situation where you're frustrated, where you're going through. So you have to see the enemy from before. See, because many of us, we can see the enemy from afar, but we can't see him close up. Come on here, I'm helping somebody. You can see him when he's from afar. You can see him when you're not in that situation. But many of us can't see the enemy when we're close up. We can't see him when we're around certain individuals we close to. Then we can't see the enemy. You can't see the enemy when we think we got it all together. You know, when we dressed up, then we don't see the enemy. But you have to understand, especially as women, as you go through in life, you have to always be prepared for what's to come. You should never take a day off, because the enemy and his imps and all of the in between, they never take a day off. They are constantly trying. Listen, what if the moment that you were going through, you could have taught somebody how victory looks like in the midst of you going through? What if your victorious moment was based on who was watching you and how you reacted, and not you really going through it all? What if what God has for you was based off of showing other people how to go through in good cheer, and it had nothing to do with you at all? What if the situation that happened on this week, on today, on the last few days, on the days that are to come, what if what you're about to encounter has everything to do with people seeing you come out victorious, even in the midst of being hurt, even in the midst of being lied on, even in the midst of being talked about, even in the midst of being hurt and abused and everything else? What if that is the test God wants you to go through, not for you, but for somebody else to see what it's like to go through with God, to go through with the light of him, to go through even though you don't know how you're going to come out? What if is that's what it's all about? What if somebody needs to encounter Christ, but if you're I'm almost finished, if you're going through and if you're having a hard time, what if you miss the fact of ministering to somebody because your attitude was just like their attitude? See, when you're real in the will of God, God will not only allow the test to come, but he'll show you how to go through. You just got to remember. See, what happens with women, and I promise you I'm closing. What happens with women a lot of times, when we go through things, we forget all that God had just taught us the week prior, the months prior, the year prior, that he was warning you that was coming. Sometimes as we go through as women, because we are so bottled up and we have so much on our shoulders to do, and we're trying to be in the will of God, we miss the fact that God was already preparing you for what was happening. He already prepared you for what was to come. And he wanted to see if you were going to pass the test this time. You want to know how you know if God was testing you to go through? Because he still works it out. But he still wanted to see if your emotions, if the way you handled it, if you were still going to handle it right. He'll still work it out. He still got you. He's still in a fight with you. But he wanted to see how you're going to go through this time. How you going to go through when the test comes unexpectedly. See, many of us expect certain people to get on their nerves. But what you going to do when the person that never get on your nerves all of a sudden is irking your nerves that day? Are you going to still have the victory? Are you still going to go through and be victorious? So I want to encourage you on today. Don't talk yourself out of being in tables that God already equipped you for. That's what I'm going to talk to you about on today. I said all that to say, don't talk yourself out of tables that God already equipped you for. One of the ladies, and this was confirmation, and honestly, I didn't even think about it till now. I had took Prophetess Moy with me, and she was sitting behind me. One of the ladies said, when she sat down next to me, her seat was right next to me, she said, I was hesitant on coming through because I didn't know if I deserved to be here, even though I accomplished so much. Officials, these are people that had badges and stars and recognitions, and she still was questioning her ability to come into the room, not because she never been in a room as such, but because she had to sit amongst, she said, women that knew her. What if you got to face the people that know you and you still got to smile even though they know what you went through? I knew what she was saying. When you got discernment and you in a room, your discernment don't just work when you in the church. I knew what she was saying because she said it very clearly. She was sitting in a room with some individuals that knew her and knew her story, knew what she had been going through, and now she got to sit here and talk in front of them at this round table. I know what she was saying. But think about it. I'm somebody that I came into the room without hesitation, but sat there and in my mind was battling if I'm supposed to be here. But she had a problem with walking through the door. Why am I saying that to you? Because as women, sometimes we think we're in this alone. Her battle may have been the same battle as mine, but it never stopped me from coming in the door. It stopped me from deliberating in my mind. Hers was stopping her from accessing what it was that she needed. The healing that she needed when I reached over and touched. Hers was stopping her from access. Mine was stopping me from trying to move forward. See, so just because you are dealing with something, it doesn't mean that somebody in the room is not dealing with it too. It's just how you wear it when you come in. I didn't express mine. She expressed hers, but we were actually thinking the same thing. Which tells me it doesn't matter the money, the status, who you are, or what you've been through. All of us are dealing with something that we have to battle. So therefore, if you're battling it and you know God has called you to something, why would you allow it to slow you down and get to the table that you know that was already prepared for you? In the midst of everything that Jesus went through, in the midst of his Judases and all of that, it never stopped him from getting to the table. He never slowed down from getting to the table. He stayed the mission. I want to encourage all of you on tonight. Stay the course and keep the mission. That the table that has been prepared for you, don't talk yourself out of it. You're worthy of being at this table that God is preparing for you. You're worthy of running the business this time. You're worthy of sitting and having the money. You're worthy of going and getting the loan. You're worthy of it. Stop talking yourself out of the marriage. You're worthy of it. Stop allowing your kids to distract you from being married. You're worthy of it. Stop allowing yourself to talk you out of having somebody there for you. Some people, we'll talk ourselves out of what God has for us.